The night was cold, and the wind carried dust across the empty ground. A man walked alone, his head lowered, his steps heavy. He had no destination, no dream, no family, no hope. Once he was a soldier, once he had a wife and a son, but all of that was gone. The war between humans and aliens had taken everything from him. Now he was only a shadow, a man waiting for the end. He often thought about ending his life. The thought did not scare him anymore. In fact, it felt like peace. But something inside kept pushing him to take one more step and then another. Perhaps it was habit. Perhaps it was punishment. He did not know. That night, he walked through a silent forest on a strange alien world. The trees were tall and twisted, glowing faintly with blue light. The ground was covered with strange flowers that opened only at night. He had come here because it was far away from humans, far away from memories, far away from pain. Then he saw something unusual in the distance. A faint light flickered between the trees. At first he thought it was his imagination, but when the light blinked again, curiosity pulled him forward. He stepped carefully, his soldier instinct still alive inside him. The forest grew darker, the silence heavier, but the light remained. When he reached a small clearing, his breath caught in his chest. At the center stood a wooden post, rough and broken, and tied to it was a small alien girl, her wrists bound with cruel metal wires. Her body weak and thin, she was trembling, her head hanging low, her skin pale like silver, and above her, burned into a piece of wood, were the words, "Take as you please." The man froze. His heart pounding, he looked around, expecting hunters or soldiers, but the clearing was empty. Only the girl and the cruel message remained. His first thought was to turn back, to leave her. This was not his fight, not his problem, but his legs did not move. The girl raised her head slowly. Her eyes were large, glowing softly in the dark. She did not speak, but her gaze was full of fear, and something else, hope. The man felt a strange pull inside his chest. It was as if his dead heart had started beating again. He wanted to ignore it. He wanted to remain broken. But those eyes would not let him. He stepped closer, his boots crunching on dry leaves. The girl flinched as if she expected pain. He whispered in a soft voice, though he had forgotten how to be gentle. "It's all right. I won't hurt you." His own words sounded strange to him. It had been years since he had promised safety to anyone. He touched the metal wires and cursed under his breath. The skin around her wrists was raw and bleeding with effort. He pulled out a small knife and cut through the bindings. The girl collapsed into his arms. Too weak to stand, she was light, fragile. Like a bird that had almost died, he held her, confused by his own actions. Why was he doing this when he had sworn never to care again? The girl whispered, her voice broken but clear. "They will come. They will come for me. And you." Her words sent a chill down his spine. Who were they? Why had they tied her here? The man looked again at the message. "I take as you please." Rage burned inside him. Hotter than any fire, whoever had done this would pay. But fear struck him too. He was only one man, broken and tired. He had no weapons except a small knife. And yet, as he looked at the girl, he felt a decision forming. He could not leave her here. He could not walk away, not this time, for the first time in years. He felt something alive inside, purpose. He lifted the girl into his arms and carried her away from the post. Every step echoed in the night. Every shadow felt like an enemy, but he did not stop. The forest seemed to watch them, the glowing trees whispering silently. The girl pressed her face against his chest. As if she trusted him, he had not been trusted in a long time. It felt heavy, but it also felt right. The man walked into the darkness with the fragile life in his arms. Behind him, the cruel post remained, waiting for its next victim. But this girl was no longer theirs to break. Not anymore. He did not know what danger was coming. He did not know who was hunting her. But deep inside, he knew one thing. This night had changed everything, and he was no longer just a broken man. The man carried the alien girl through the forest, his arms aching but his mind racing. Her small body was so light it felt like carrying a shadow, and yet the weight of her presence was heavier than anything he had felt in years. She whispered again in a broken voice, "They will come." And then her eyes closed as if she could not fight the darkness any longer. He feared she had died, but her chest still moved faintly with breath. He tightened his grip, promising silently that she would live, at least as long as he had strength to protect her. Hours passed as he wandered deeper into the alien woods. The glowing plants gave him enough light to see, but also made him feel exposed. Every sound of cracking branches or moving leaves made him reach for the small knife at his belt. He was used to being hunted, but this time it was different. This time, he was not only running for himself this time. Someone else's life depended on him, finally. He found a broken starship half buried in the ground. Its metal frame was rusted, its engines long dead, but it was shelter. He laid the girl gently on a piece of cloth he tore from his coat. Her face was pale, her breathing shallow, but she was alive for the first time in years. He lit a small fire, not for warmth, but to bring light into the shadow where fear waited. When the girl awoke, her glowing eyes studied him with caution. She spoke slowly, as if every word was pain. "You should have left me. They wanted me to be taken." The man frowned, his voice harsh though his heart softened. "Taken by who? And why?" She shook her head, tears shining. "By anyone. By everyone. They wrote those words so people would treat me as less than life." The man felt his blood burn with anger. He had seen cruelty before, he had seen war destroy families. But leaving a child tied to a post like an object was worse than any battlefield. He gave her water, and as she drank, he studied her carefully. Her silver skin shimmered faintly. Her hair was white like fallen ash, but what caught him most were the marks on her arms, symbols glowing faintly under her skin. They were not tattoos. They were something older, something powerful. The man remembered stories from the war, stories about a royal line among the aliens, a bloodline said to carry ancient power, a bloodline that was supposed to be extinct. His chest grew tight as he realized the truth. This girl was not only alive, she was impossible. A living heir, a secret meant to stay hidden. "The girl who should not exist, who are you?" he asked quietly. Her lips trembled, but she finally spoke. "My name is Leora, and I was never meant to be seen." The name echoed in his mind like a bell. Leora, a name that belonged in old whispers and forbidden legends. If the wrong people found her, they would use her as a weapon. If the Empire knew she was alive, wars would ignite again, and if humans discovered her, they would see her as nothing but a prize. The man stood and walked to the broken doorway of the ship. He stared at the forest, his thoughts clashing like blades. He had wanted to die before. He had wanted to end his own pain. But now fate had placed this impossible child in his path. She was hunted, cursed, and abandoned. But in her he saw something he had lost. Hope. Leora sat up weakly, her voice trembling. "You should leave me. You will die if you stay with me." The man turned, his eyes dark but steady. "I was already dying," he said simply. "Now at least, I have a reason not to." Her gaze widened at his words, and for the first time, her lips curved into a faint, broken smile. Outside, the forest echoed with distant sounds. Not the cries of animals, but the heavy steps of hunters. They were close, and they were many. The man knew they would track her, that they would not stop. But he also knew that he could not abandon her. Not after seeing the cruelty of that post. Not after hearing her name. He checked his knife and tightened the strap of his coat. His mind sharpened the way it once did in battle. Every tree, every shadow, every sound became a piece of war. He was no longer only a broken man. He was a protector, unwilling but unshaken. He looked back at Leora, fragile yet glowing with something beyond fear. She was more than a child, more than an alien. She was the spark that could change everything. As the firelight flickered, Leora whispered again, "They will never stop. Not until I'm gone." The man knelt beside her, his eyes hard with determination. "Then let them come," he said. "They will learn what happens when you leave cruelty in the path of a human." And in that moment, the silence of the forest broke. Lights moved between the trees. Voices shouted in alien tongues. The hunters had arrived. The man stood tall, knife in hand, his heart no longer empty. The broken man was gone. What remained was something else, something the hunters were not ready to face. The night broke with the sound of footsteps, heavy and sharp. The forest, which had been silent for hours, now carried the echoes of hunters. They were not men of mercy, they were not simple wanderers. They were trackers, killers, and slavers who had followed the trail of the alien girl. The man could hear their voices in the distance, rough and eager. Every word they spoke carried greed, as if they were chasing a prize that promised fortune. Inside the broken starship, Leora trembled. Her silver skin glowed faintly in the firelight, making her impossible to hide. The man placed his hand on her shoulder and whispered, "Quiet now, not a sound." She nodded. Though fear made her breath come fast and shallow, he could see her eyes glowing with tears. But he did not allow pity to control him. He needed focus. He needed the strength of the soldier he once was. He quickly covered the fire with dirt. Drowning the light, darkness returned, cold and heavy. The broken ship became their shield. Though it was weak against real weapons, he crouched near a hole in the wall, watching the hunters move between the glowing trees. Their armor was dark, their weapons sharp, and their eyes searching with hunger. He counted 6, then 8, then more, too many. Far too many for one man with a knife. But retreat was not an option. He remembered the cruel words carved on the post. "Take as you please." His jaw tightened, anger burning deeper than fear. He would not let them take her again, not while he still breathed. His life had been empty, worthless. But tonight it had meaning, and meaning was stronger than fear. The hunters began to spread out. One of them carried a scanner, its red light flashing as it searched the ground. The man knew they would find the broken trail he had left. He had been careful, but not careful enough. They were skilled, and they wanted her badly. He turned to Leora and whispered, "Stay low, stay silent, no matter what you hear." Her lips trembled as she whispered back, "They will kill you." He gave her a half-smile, grim and sharp. "Maybe, but they will not take you." The hunters came closer, their footsteps louder now. One voice barked an order, another laughed cruelly. Then suddenly silence. The man knew that silence, it was the moment before violence. And then it happened. One hunter ripped away a panel of the ship, light from his visor flashing inside. The man moved like the soldier he had once been. His knife struck fast, finding the weak spot between armor plates. The hunter gasped and fell without a sound. Leora covered her mouth to stop her scream, her eyes wide as she saw blood spill across the floor. The man grabbed the fallen weapon, a crude blaster, heavy but functional. His hands remembered the feel of guns, though years had passed since he last held one. The hunters shouted, their voices angry. Their weapons raised, the fight had begun, and there was no turning back. He fired into the darkness, each shot forcing them to scatter. But he knew it was only a matter of time before they surrounded him. Leora clutched her chest, whispering words in her alien tongue. Her skin glowed brighter, symbols on her arms pulsing with light. The man turned to her sharply. "What are you doing?" Her voice shook. "I cannot control it. It comes when I am afraid," and then it happened. Light burst from her body, sharp and blinding. The hunters screamed as their visors cracked, their weapons sparking in the surge. The forest itself seemed to tremble, the glowing trees bending toward her. The man shielded his eyes, stunned by the impossible power. When the light faded, 3 hunters lay dead, smoke rising from their armor. The rest stumbled back, shouting in fear, calling her accursed heir, a forbidden child. The man stared at her, shocked. He had thought she was only a victim, only a fragile girl. But what he saw now was something different, something dangerous. Leora collapsed, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't mean to. I don't want to hurt them." He caught her before she hit the ground, his voice harsh but steady. "You saved us. Don't ever regret surviving." The hunters who survived fled into the forest. But the man knew they would return with more. They would not stop, not until they had her. He carried Leora on his back, leaving the ruined ship behind. The stars above looked cold and merciless, but he no longer felt small under them. The girl was not just a child. She was a storm waiting to be unleashed, and somehow fate had made him her shield. As dawn approached, he reached a high ridge and looked out across the valley. Fires burned in the distance, villages or camps where hunters gathered. Everywhere the world seemed to whisper the same truth. This was only the beginning. The man tightened his grip on the stolen blaster, his knife still at his side, his will stronger than it had ever been. The hunt had begun, but he was no longer prey. Not tonight, not ever again. The forest was silent after the battle. The air carried the smell of burned metal and blood. The man walked with heavy steps. The girl clinging weakly to his back, her body trembled, not from the cold, but from the memory of the light she had released. The power had saved them. But it had also frightened her every time she whispered. Her words carried fear. "I didn't want to. I didn't mean to." The man did not answer. He knew that guilt, he knew that weight. For years he had carried the ghosts of war. His wife and son had been killed in the chaos between humans and aliens. And though he had survived, he never forgave himself. Every night he saw their faces in his dreams, Every day he wondered if he should have died with them. Now as he looked at Leora, he saw another ghost forming, not a memory of the past but a shadow of the future. If she was truly the heir of an ancient empire, then her life would be nothing but danger. The galaxy would hunt her, use her, and tear her apart. He wondered if protecting her was saving her, or only delaying the pain that waited by dawn. They reached the edge of the forest where the land turned rocky. The man spotted smoke rising from an old outpost. Broken ships lay scattered and rusted machines were half buried in the dirt. It looked abandoned, but he knew better. Places like this were never empty. They were filled with people who had nowhere else to go. Smugglers, thieves, and those who lived in the cracks of war. He carried Leora into the shadows of the outpost. The air smelled of oil and old fires. At first no one came near them, but then a voice called, rough and sharp, "Stranger, you don't belong here." From the ruins stepped an old man with a crooked back and sharp eyes. He carried no weapon, but his presence was enough to make the man tense. The smuggler studied him, then looked at Leora. When he saw the glowing marks on her arms, his eyes widened. He whispered something in a language the man did not understand. Then he spat on the ground and said, "You are cursed bringing her here. Do you know who she is?" The man's hand tightened on his knife, his voice low. "I know enough," the smuggler laughed bitterly. "Enough to die. Maybe." He invited them into a hidden chamber beneath the outpost. It was filled with crates, stolen tech, and old maps. The smuggler gave Leora water and food, and though suspicious, he did not harm her. Instead, he stared at her as if she were a ghost. Finally, he spoke in a quiet voice. "I thought her kind was gone forever." The man frowned. "Her kind?" The smuggler nodded. "The royal bloodline. The old rulers of the empire. The ones who carried the power of the ancients." The word struck the man like a blade. So the rumors were true. She was the heir of a galactic throne. But she was also a child tied to a post with cruel words. He clenched his fists, the rage inside him burning hotter. The smuggler leaned close, his eyes sharp. "Do you know what you carry? She is not only valuable, she is dangerous. Armies will rise and fall because of her." The man said nothing, but his silence was an answer. Leora, her voice faint, spoke at last. "I never wanted to be heir. I never wanted this power." Her words shook. Her eyes filled with tears. The man turned to her, his voice rough but steady. "No child asks for the burden of the world." She looked at him, surprised as if no one had ever spoken to her like that before. The smuggler leaned back, sighing. "You will not survive long. They will keep hunting her. They will send more, stronger, deadlier." The man's jaw tightened. Let them come. But inside he knew the smuggler was right. His knife and stolen blaster were not enough to fight armies. He needed more. He needed allies that night. As Leora slept, the man sat by the fire. The flames reflected in his eyes, showing the ghosts that lived within. He remembered the screams of his family, the fire that consumed their home. He remembered the cold silence after, the years of emptiness. Now another child had been placed in his hands, another fragile life that could be taken at any moment. He swore quietly to the fire, but not again, never again, but fate was already moving against him. In the distance, ships landed in the valley, their engines roaring like thunder. Dozens of hunters, soldiers, and mercenaries poured out, their banners marked with alien symbols. The smuggler's eyes widened in fear. "They've come. The council has sent their dogs." The man rose to his feet, his shadow tall against the fire, his voice was cold as steel. "Then it's time they meet the ghosts they created." The night inside the smuggler's outpost was uneasy. The man did not sleep, his eyes never leaving the shadows. Leora lay curled near the fire, her breathing soft but troubled. The smuggler paced slowly, muttering to himself, his sharp eyes always darting to the girl. There was something in his stare, something more than fear, something greedy. The man noticed it but said nothing. He had fought too many battles to ignore the smell of betrayal. At dawn, the valley outside came alive with movement. Dozens of hunters marched under banners of the alien council. Their weapons gleamed in the light, their ships circled like predators. The smuggler trembled as he looked out from the hidden window. "They are too many. You cannot fight them. You should give the girl to them. Maybe they will let you live." The man's jaw tightened, his voice harsh. "Or maybe they will kill us both. And you as well." The smuggler fell silent, but his eyes told another story. The man prepared the little he had. His stolen blaster, his knife, and his soldier's mind, every step, every breath. Every movement had to count. He checked the exits, the paths, the weak spots of the outpost if they were coming. He would make them bleed before they reached her. But betrayal came faster than he expected. As he turned, he saw the smuggler whispering into a small comm device. The man's hand shot forward, grabbing the smuggler by the throat. His knife pressed against the old man's skin. "You called them here," he growled, his voice sharp with fury. The smuggler choked, his face pale. "They offered me safe passage. Gold. A ship. I had no choice." The man's eyes burned with rage. There is always a choice. Before he could decide the smuggler's fate, the walls shook with an explosion. The hunters had arrived, their weapons tearing through the outpost like fire. Leora screamed as the roof cracked, dust and stone falling around her. The man shoved the smuggler aside and grabbed his blaster. The door burst open and soldiers stormed in. Armored and armed, the man fired without hesitation. Every shot precise, every movement fast. 2 soldiers fell. Another cried out, but more pushed forward. Blades clashed with steel. Blaster fire filled the air. The smuggler tried to crawl away, but a stray shot ended him. He fell with a scream, his betrayal cut short by the very people he had trusted. The man did not even look at him again. Betrayal always ended the same way, with blood. The hunters surged into the chamber, but the man fought like a storm. He moved with the precision of a soldier who had nothing left to lose. His knife flashed, his blaster roared. He was one man against many, but his rage made him more. Leora hid behind broken crates, her hands pressed to her head, her body glowing faintly. She whispered in fear, "Not again. Not again." And then it happened. A soldier raised his weapon at her, ready to strike. The man saw it, but he was too far to stop it. Leora's eyes snapped open, and light burst from her body. The room shook, walls cracked, weapons shattered. Soldiers screamed as the power tore through them like fire through dry wood. The man shielded his face, his body trembling under the force. When the light faded, the chamber was silent. Smoke filled the air. Bodies lay scattered, their armor melted. Leora stood in the center, her eyes glowing. Tears streaming down her cheeks, she whispered, "I didn't want this. I can't stop it." The man stepped toward her, his voice steady though his heart raced. "You are alive. That's all that matters." But in his mind, he wondered if her power would destroy her before the hunters ever could. Outside, more soldiers shouted, preparing another attack. The man grabbed Leora's hand, pulling her through the smoke. They ran through hidden tunnels, past rusted machines and broken ships. The ground shook as explosions followed them, the council's wrath spreading across the valley. Leora stumbled, weak from the power she had unleashed. The man lifted her again, carrying her despite the weight of his wounds. His body burned, his chest ached, but his will did not break. They reached the edge of the outpost where an old transport ship lay rusting. The man forced open the hatch, the metal screeching. Inside, the ship smelled of oil and rot, but its engines hummed faintly. He placed Leora in a seat and began working the controls. Behind them, soldiers poured into the valley. Shouting with rage, the man slammed his hand against the console, sparks flying. The ship coughed, groaned, and then roared to life as the vessel lifted into the sky. Leora stared at him with wide, frightened eyes. "You fought them all. You saved me," she whispered. The man shook his head, his voice heavy. "No. We saved each other." Below, the outpost burned, the smuggler's betrayal buried under fire and ash. But the hunt was not over. The council would send more. Stronger, faster, and deadlier. The man tightened his grip on the controls, his eyes dark and unyielding. He was no longer only protecting her, he was striking back. And the galaxy would soon learn that betrayal and blood were only the beginning. The transport ship cut through the night sky like a wounded bird. Its engines coughed and shook, metal plates rattling with every movement. The man gripped the controls tightly, forcing the dying ship to keep flying. Behind them, the valley burned. The hunters scattered among smoke and ruins. Betrayal had ended in blood, but the fight was far from over. Leora sat in the co-pilot's chair, her eyes wide and fearful. Her skin still glowed faintly, the marks on her arms pulsing with light. She whispered, "They will not stop. They will send more. Stronger than before." The man looked at her, his jaw set like iron. "Then we stop running," he said, his voice rough but steady. Her gaze trembled. "But how?" "It is only you and me." He shook his head. "Not anymore. If they want war, then we bring it to them." The ship groaned as it landed in the ruins of an old human outpost. Here, broken machines and rusted weapons were buried under the dust of forgotten battles. The man stepped out, his boots crunching on shattered stone. The ghosts of his past were everywhere, the ruins of the war that had destroyed his family. He remembered the screams, the fire, the silence afterward. For years he had run from those memories, drowning them in emptiness, but now as he stood beside Leora, he felt something shift inside him. The pain had not vanished, but it had purpose. He turned to her, his voice steady. They made me a ghost. They took everything from me, but they will not take you. Leora lowered her head, whispering, I am cursed. Everyone I touch dies. I bring only destruction. The man placed a hand on her shoulder, firm and unshaking. No, you are more than what they want you to believe. You are a child and you deserve to live. Her eyes widened, shimmering with tears. No one had spoken to her like that before. Not as a weapon, not as a prize, but as a person. Days passed as they hid among the ruins. The man repaired weapons, sharpened blades, and studied the maps left behind each night. Leora trained to control her power. At first the light burst uncontrolled, burning everything around her. But slowly, with the man's guidance, she learned to focus. She closed her eyes, breathing deep, and the light bent to her will. Small orbs of energy hovered in her palms. Harmless until she commanded otherwise, she still trembled with fear. But she was learning. Together they were no longer prey. They were preparing to strike back. One night the silence broke. Scouts of the alien council arrived, their ship circling above. The man watched from the shadows as soldiers marched through the ruins. Their leader shouted, Find the girl. The heir must not escape. The man's blood boiled. His anger no longer hollow but sharp like a blade. He whispered to Leora, Tonight we show them. Tonight they learn what retribution means. The battle began with fire and shadows. The man moved through the ruins like a ghost of war. His blaster roared, his knife struck. Every soldier that came close fell to his fury. Leora stood in the center, her light glowing brighter. She spread her hands and the symbols on her arms flared like burning stars. Bolts of energy shot out, blasting through armor, shattering weapons. The soldiers cried out in fear, shouting, The cursed heir, the forbidden bloodline. But this time, Leora did not collapse. Her eyes were steady, her tears replaced by strength. She controlled the storm instead of letting it control her. The man fought beside her, his movements sharp and relentless. Together they tore through the hunters for the first time. The galaxy's predators were the ones who ran. When the last soldier fell, silence returned to the ruins. The man stood breathing hard. His body aching with wounds, Leora walked to him. Her glowing eyes full of fire, she whispered, They will come again. They will never stop. The man nodded, his face shadowed but determined. Then we take the fight to them. He looked at the sky where the council's ship still circled. His voice was cold, filled with steel. They tied you to a post. They wrote those words to break you. They wanted the galaxy to see you as nothing. He tightened his grip on his knife, his eyes burning. But tonight they will learn. Humans do not forget cruelty. Humans strike back. Leora's small hand gripped his tightly. For the first time she did not look afraid, she whispered. Then we rise together. The man nodded. And for the first time since he had lost his family, he felt alive. Not empty. Not broken, but alive with purpose. In the days that followed, they gathered weapons from fallen soldiers. They repaired the old transport ship piece by piece. The man spread word through the hidden channels of smugglers and rebels. Whispers spread across the stars, of a human warrior and a glowing child, of battles fought in the ruins, of hunters slain by light and fury. The oppressed listened. The desperate listened, and slowly, the broken began to gather. Not for gold, not for glory, but for retribution. The galaxy had long forgotten what a single human could do when pushed too far. But soon it would remember, and soon the council would face the storm they had created with their own cruelty. The man looked at Leora as she practiced, her light steady in her hands. She was no longer only a victim, she was a symbol. And he was no longer only a broken man, he was her shield, her sword. Her shadow in the fire, retribution had risen, and it would not stop until the galaxy trembled. The stars burned bright above the ruins. Ships drifted like shadows across the sky, their engines glowing red. The alien council had gathered their fleet stronger and larger than before this time. They did not send hunters or scouts this time, they came with war to them. Leora was too dangerous to be left alive, and the human who protected her was an insult that could not be ignored. The man stood at the edge of the ridge, looking at the horizon where flames painted the sky. Beside him, Leora's small hand rested in his, her glowing eyes fixed on the stars. Her voice was soft yet filled with fire. "They are coming for us. For me." The man nodded slowly, his face carved in stone. "Then we meet them head on. We do not run anymore." For days, word had spread across the broken edges of the galaxy. Smugglers, rebels, and survivors whispered of the girl with silver skin, and of the human warrior who fought like a ghost of vengeance. The stories grew, and with them, people began to gather. One by one, ships landed in the ruins, carrying those who had suffered under the Council's cruelty. Humans, aliens, outcasts, all drawn by the spark of rebellion. They came not for gold but for hope, and hope was stronger than fear. The man watched as fighters repaired their weapons, as children hid in caves, clutching their mothers, as old soldiers lifted rifles with shaking hands. This was no army of power, it was an army of the broken. But the broken had nothing left to lose, and that made them dangerous. When the Council fleet finally descended, the sky turned black with fire. Dozens of warships filled the heavens, their cannons glowing. A voice thundered through the air. "Cold and merciless, deliver the child, and your deaths will be swift." The rebels trembled, fear spreading like smoke. But the man stepped forward, raising his weapon, his voice loud and unyielding. "You tied her to a post and called her nothing. But now she is more than you will ever be." He raised his fist, his words sharp as steel. "This is retribution, and it begins now." The battle erupted with fire. Ships clashed in the skies, their engines roaring, their weapons tearing through clouds. On the ground, soldiers surged forward, their banners snapping in the wind. The rebels met them with fury, their cries shaking the ruins. The man fought in the front lines, his blade flashing, his blaster roaring. Every strike carried the weight of years of pain. Every breath carried the strength of purpose. Leora stood in the center of the battlefield, her light glowing brighter than ever before. The marks on her arms burned like fire, her eyes shining like stars. She lifted her hands, and energy burst across the battlefield. Shields shattered, weapons broke. Soldiers screamed as the storm of light consumed them. The rebels rallied behind her, their fear replaced by awe. She was no longer a child tied to a post. She was the heir of power, the spark of freedom. But the Council's leaders stepped down from their ships. Tall, armored, cruel, their faces hidden behind masks of gold. They raised their hands, unleashing storms of dark energy. The ground cracked, fire tore through the ruins. The man was thrown to his knees, his chest burning with pain, but he pushed himself up. Blood on his lips, fury in his eyes, he charged forward, striking one of the lords with his blade. The clash shook the earth. Human rage against alien cruelty. Leora cried out, her light exploding in waves. Her power clashed with theirs, fire against fire. The sky split with storms of energy, ships burning as they fell. The battle was chaos, but in the chaos there was truth. The galaxy had always bowed to fear, but now it saw something else. It saw a child's light and a human's will standing against empires. The man's body ached, every wound screaming, but when he looked at Leora, he found strength. She fought not as a weapon, but as a soul. She fought for freedom, for life, for hope. Together they pushed forward, their fury tearing through the lords, and one by one the golden masks fell. The Council was broken, their empire cracked. When silence finally came, the battlefield was covered in smoke and ash. The rebels stood among the ruins, their voices rising in cries of victory. Ships burned in the sky, their wreckage falling like dying stars. Leora stood tall, her light fading softly, her tears falling like rain. The man walked to her, his body broken but his spirit alive. He placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice rough but steady. "It is over. They cannot hurt you anymore." She looked at him with trembling lips, whispering, "They wanted me to be nothing, but you made me believe I could be more." His chest tightened, not with pain, but with something he had thought lost forever. Hope. He knelt, his hand firm on hers, his voice soft. No child should ever be left with those words. No one should ever be tied to cruelty. She leaned against him, and for the first time, she smiled without fear. The sun began to rise, its golden light cutting through the smoke. The broken army of rebels stood tall, their eyes lifted to the dawn. The man, once ready to die, now stood alive with purpose. He was no longer only a ghost, no longer only a broken man. He was the shield of a child who had become more than an heir. He was the sword of retribution, the spark of a new age. And as the light of morning spread across the battlefield, a new dawn began, not just for him, not just for Leora, but for the galaxy itself.